Breaking now, Israel to increase airstrikes as military forces prepare to enter Gaza on the ground. Palestinian authorities report the death toll rising past 4,000 people. Also this hour, thousands of people report tremors as a magnitude 5.0 earthquake on the Great Ocean Road is felt across Victoria and as far away as Tasmania. China agrees to review tariffs on Australian wine ahead of Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's meeting with Xi Jinping in Beijing next month. And in sport this hour, Stars struck records fall in the Women's Big Bash League as the Melbourne Stars go all out for just 29 runs against the Adelaide Strikers. Good evening. First, to breaking news in Israel will increase airstrikes in Gaza ahead of a ground invasion. Palestinian authorities have confirmed the death toll has risen again. 4,365 people killed and many more wounded. Around 255 of those deaths were in the past 24 hours, including in the southern Gaza Strip. National Affairs editor Austin Pollock has the latest.
It is now almost 2 weeks since Hamas launched surprise cross-border raids from Gaza. Now today, Israeli military forces have confirmed they will intensify attacks in Gaza starting from today, signalling the beginning of a possible ground invasion as they also increase air attacks across the area. It comes as humanitarian aid also begins to arrive. In the past 24 hours, here is the latest. Firstly, Hamas says it tried to release 2 civilians they detained, but Israel refused, saying it will not respond to mediocrity propaganda. Israel says it will step up air attacks on Gaza as the military gears up for a possible ground invasion. Fighting on the Israel-Lebanon border with Hezbollah saying 6 fighters were killed and Israel saying 1 soldier was killed. Israeli aircraft struck the Jenin refugee camp in occupied West Bank territory earlier on Sunday, killing 2 Palestinians and wounding several others. And a convoy of trucks have been allowed to enter Gaza carrying much needed humanitarian aid. The death toll in Gaza has reached 4,385 according to the latest update from the Palestinian Ministry of Health. Now this number includes 248 people who lost their lives in the past day, with 56 of them in the southern Gaza Strip. Now that is an area where civilians have been urged to relocate, as reported by the Hamas-run government media office in Gaza. And there have been at least 84 Palestinian fatalities in occupied West Bank attributed to Israeli occupation forces, that according to a statement from the Palestinian Health Ministry in Ramallah. Now, a new video released, US President Joe Biden spoke with the 2 freed American hostages who were held by Hamas in Gaza. They were kidnapped as Hamas launched its offensive in the southern Israel on October 7. Take a look.
Hello, President.
I'm so glad you're home. I'm not home. I'm glad you're out.
Thank you so very, very much.
Hey, Nat, how are you? God love you.
I just want to say thank you for your services for Israel.
Well, look, that's been long serving. I'm just delighted we're able to get you out. We've been working on it a long time. We're gonna get them all out, God willing. I just want to say,
Really?
I hope you're both not only feeling good, but in good health as well.
Now down in the south today, a massive breakthrough, the opening of the Rafah crossing between Egypt and southern Gaza, allowing for food, water, shelter and medicine supplies to be delivered. Those medical supplies particularly important given the state of the hospitals right now in Gaza, with supplies very, very scarce. It is important to note that just 20 trucks were allowed to cross during that time. Before the outbreak of the conflict, an average of about 450 aid trucks were arriving daily into Gaza. So many there saying it is really just a drop in the ocean. It all comes though with no fuel allowed to be brought in via those aid trucks. Now, unfortunately, it is still up in the air in terms of what the next round of aid trucks will look like and how soon that will be, and when the border will finally freely be open for foreign nationals wanting to leave, which we now know includes 45 Australians.
And thousands have marched in pro-Palestine rallies for the second weekend in a row across the nation. Crowds turned out in Melbourne today, while yesterday an estimated 12,000 to 15,000 people attended a rally in Sydney. Rallies also being held in Brisbane and Perth. Police officers in New South Wales told the AAP there had been no reports of aggressive or violent behaviour. Premier Chris Minns had earlier taken a zero-tolerance approach to hate speech after anti-Semitic comments were made outside the Sydney Opera House last week. Thousands of people have reported tremors after a magnitude 5.0 earthquake on the Great Ocean Road in Victoria. The quake was felt across Melbourne and as far away as Bendigo and Tasmania. 6 News reporter Lincoln Holmes has more from Geelong.
For the third time this year, an earthquake in Victoria, strong enough to wake people across the entire state. Thousands of people, including in inner-city Melbourne, feeling tremors at about 2:11 a.m. overnight. The earthquake was recorded near the Great Ocean Road town of Apollo Bay, and initially reported as a magnitude 5.1, before later being downgraded to a magnitude 4.7, then revised up to a magnitude 5. Outside of people in Melbourne, the quake has also been reported as far away as Bendigo, Tasmania, and the New South Wales Victorian border. A magnitude 3.5 aftershock was also felt just before 6 a.m. The SES has received several calls for assistance for minor damage with no injuries reported. Back in May, a magnitude 3.8 tremor struck the city's northwest shortly before midnight, which was the strongest in more than 100 years in metropolitan Melbourne. Then, in late June, a magnitude 4.5 quake was reported by more than 9,000 people and felt as far away as Canberra. And in September 2021, a magnitude 5.9 earthquake hit, not late at night, but at 9:15 a.m. That caused minor building damage and led to one person being injured. Lincoln Holmes, 6 News.
China has agreed to review tariffs on Australian wine ahead of Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's meeting with Xi Jinping in Beijing next month. Mr Albanese will be in China from the 4th to the 7th of November, focusing on a stable relationship and building on previous discussions which the government has described as productive. The leaders will discuss cooperation in a range of areas, including economic links and climate change. The PM will also attend the China International Import Expo. China has agreed to a 5-month review of its tariffs on wine that began back in 2020. As a result, Australia agreeing to suspend its action in the World Trade Organization today. It will be the first visit to China by an Australian PM since 2016 and Anthony Albanese's first, which also marks 50 years since the very first visit to China by an Aussie PM when Gough Whitlam travelled there in 1973. Tributes are continuing to come in following the death of former Governor-General and Labor leader Bill Hayden. Hayden, who some described as the greatest Prime Minister Australia never had, served as opposition leader from 1977 until 1983. He was later the 21st Governor-General from 1989 to 1996. NDIS Minister and former Labor leader Bill Shorten says Hayden was a source of conviction and insight drawn from his personal values, adding that he, quote, believed in a classless welfare system where anyone who needed government payments were not stigmatised. Liberal leader Peter Dutton also saying Hayden achieved great things in public life, leaving Australia that much greater thanks to his service. Bill Hayden was 90. Overseas now, in the United States House of Representatives remains without a speaker, the position second in the presidential line of succession. Republicans remain divided with no unified nominee weeks after Kevin McCarthy was removed from office. North American correspondent Wyatt Sharp has the latest on that, and a look also at how President Joe Biden has been dealing with the current situation in Israel and Gaza.
The visit to Israel was meant to show solidarity and support unequivocally on America's behalf, but also to kind of almost go against that to a certain degree, or in addition to that, to also illustrate that the United States believes that innocent Palestinians also have the right to go about their everyday lives, even as Israel defends itself. So that was kind of the overall messaging of President Biden's trip to Israel, is ensuring that innocent civilians' lives on both sides are protected, while also underlying that Israel does have, obviously, the right to defend itself against Hamas. It very much is a similar message that we are seeing from the American executive branch with the president, as we saw as it related to the war in Ukraine. We have seen President Biden demonstrating an unequivocal amount of support. He obviously made his address from the Oval Office, where he kind of relayed a similar message. He also has been, over the course of the past number of weeks, ever since this war first broke out, throughout various press conferences and speaking with the media, he has underlined that support for the Israeli people and for innocent civilians. And he really is trying to make that as clear as possible. He also recently did an interview on 60 Minutes where he made clear that the United States will not bend or will not have to pull away support from either of those two countries, whether it be Ukraine or Israel, and that because they are the United States, they are a powerful country, and therefore they are able to provide the necessary amount of support to both of those two countries at the same time. So that's certainly a message that we are seeing from President Biden and the Americans as we are obviously watching the developing situation. The role that the speakership plays in the United States is a far greater role than a country that has kind of a parliamentary system. So the role that someone like Kevin McCarthy or Nancy Pelosi or Paul Ryan or any of the recent House speakers have had to play is in the majority of cases a far greater role than someone like the Canadian House Speaker or perhaps the Speaker in Australia would have to play. They are responsible. They are, for a number of things, they are in the line of succession to the presidency, and thus it is a very important role. And the chaos that ensued, of course, after Matt Gaetz put forth this motion to vacate, which was ultimately supported by the entirety of the Democratic Conference on Capitol Hill, but also by 8 Republicans, some of which was perhaps expected, but there were some of the House Republicans within the conference who voted in favor of the motion to vacate. That was perhaps unexpected and that was surprising. There were people like Nancy Mace, who's a Republican congresswoman from South Carolina, who nobody really expected to vote in favor of the motion to vacate. She had voiced support previously to Speaker McCarthy in January when Speaker McCarthy was first elected as House Speaker, and Matt Gaetz was, again, the person who was holding up McCarthy's election to the Speaker's gavel. Nancy Mace had called Matt Gaetz selfish publicly. So really, there is no shortage of drama, and this drama is really continuing, which is putting a delay to actually electing someone to the gavel. This is also relevant, of course, with the ongoing war in Israel right now. The House Speaker can play a very pivotal and vital role in actually ensuring that support can get to the ground there to help those innocent civilians who are fighting back. And so we have seen a number of different people who have been put forth by the Republican conference. Of course, the Republicans are currently in a slim majority on Capitol Hill, which really does make it difficult not only to get policy and pieces of legislation through the House of Representatives, but also in an instance like this to elect a House Speaker, which is usually kind of a very basic process. Both conferences, the Democratic and Republican conferences, will put forth their nominee, and then they take it to the floor of the House, and it's kind of, this very symbolic moment. It's nothing really like what we have been seeing over the course of the past little while. They get elected as House Speaker, and then they take the gavel for the entirety of the country and the world to see. But really, that's been anything other than what we've been seeing happening as of recently. Republicans nominated Steve Scalise, then they nominated Jim Jordan, and they've went through several ballots, very similar to what took place in January. And still, it doesn't seem as if a House Speaker is going to be elected anytime soon, if the past couple of days have been any indication.
Media personality Basil Zemplis has been re-elected Lord Mayor of Perth. Rival Sandy Angie, who had been running on a promise of full term, congratulated Zemplis on social media, saying she wishes him all the best for facing the challenges the city faces. Rumours have swirled in recent weeks that Zemplis may join the Liberal Party, who have just 2 seats currently in the WA lower house and is a potential leadership material candidate, a contender for the party.
Because of the numbers, because of the sort of election that it was, and knowing there were only 3 candidates and that preferences were less likely to come into a significant play with us, we were expecting around about this time. I was very hopeful that it would be me. I was pretty confident going in. You're never overconfident, but I was expecting to win. Before the count started today, I said to those closest to me, I expect to win, but I absolutely appreciate that you can get a surprise in these sorts of elections. And I'm very pleased that our instincts were correct.
Local elections in WA are held periodically, meaning some councillors will not be up for election until 2025. The Victorian Liberal Party will run a candidate in the upcoming Mulgrave by-election, despite former Premier Jeff Kennett urging them not to. The by-election will be held on November 18 and is already being contested by high-profile independent candidate Ian Cook, following the resignation of former Premier Dan Andrews last month. 6 News election reporter Maggie Perry has more.
We've seen the Victorian Socialists already announce their candidate as a candidate for Thomastown from 2022. And the Freedom Party will likely recontest because they had their Hayden McClendon contesting against Dan Andrews, only got 2% of the vote. It'll be interesting to see how well Ian Cook does, because with the large incumbency swing that will disappear from Labor, I think there's a good chance he could actually pick up the seat. In 2018, when Dan Andrews ran as the Premier candidate, he got an 8% swing towards his seat. Once marginal, it became very safe. But if that incumbency swing were to disappear amidst the Commonwealth Games scandal that Labor has been dealing with, there could be a sizable swing, and maybe sizable enough to end up with Ian Cook winning the seat.
Good thing, of course, about a preferential system is you can't really have dramatic vote splitting, but it wouldn't be too hard to imagine a situation where, again, Liberals and Cook finish, high 20s, 30s, and enough voters from one of those camps don't put the other second or at least above whoever the Labor candidate is, and that could help Labor get across the line if it is a marginal contest. So could that be something that we might see, and that might also slow the result down if it does indeed get really close?
Yeah, I reckon that Ian Cook will most likely gain in terms of primary votes. Liberals, maybe, if they field a notable candidate, but they don't really have a presence in southeast Melbourne. So I can't imagine that thing happening. And they also had a very controversial candidate who was for the Liberals. So we really won't know who will come second. And it might be a result that will end up deciding the winner of the seat, because maybe Liberals come second, and so Ian Cook's voters preference Labor ahead. But Ian Cook will probably get a stronger preference flow from the Liberals than they would to give back to them. So if Ian Cook were to finish third, I feel like Labor would probably have a higher chance of keeping the seat, which they already are definitely the front runners. But yeah.
And of course, we'll see how maybe the Dandenong councillor element comes into play at next year's local government elections in Victoria. But we'll move on from that and go to the UK now, where they've had 2 by-elections held on a Thursday, because the UK does that for some reason. Both Conservative seats and both gained by Labor pretty convincingly. What can you tell us?
Well, I think this is a shocking result for the Conservatives. I doubt they really have any hope of gaining a majority or a minority government in the next election, which is in just a year. Labor has been the front runner in the polls, and they've convincingly shown that in past by-elections. In Tamworth, this is a seat they held by 44%, the Conservatives did, and it was overturned by Labor, which is the biggest majority overturned in all of UK history. Interestingly, the aspect of the right-wing vote seems to have split amongst other parties like Reform UK, with the alternative voting system, which the Conservatives disagreed on in 10 years ago or so. They would have likely won this seat with that voting system. So I wonder if they might try and employ it in the future now that they've fallen back in the polls.
Yeah, UK had that. I was just going to say, yeah, UK had that referendum about a decade ago, no to the alternative vote, or as we'd call it here, preferential voting. So they're still stuck with first past the post. So you get that split vote element. What was the other seat though?
In Bedfordshire. This is also a very rural constituency, and this has been held by the Conservatives for more than 90 years. Labor has never held this seat, and they also convincingly managed to overturn the seat. This time, there was the Liberal Democrat aspect. They picked up 23% of the vote, while Labor ended up with 34%. The Conservatives were 31%. Once again, there was a strong right-wing vote in Reform UK, as well as the English Democrat Party. So I really think that the Conservatives don't stand a chance. I can't imagine a scenario where they manage to overtake Labor in the polls. And even if they were to, I can't imagine they'd form a majority government with the Liberal Democrats or maybe Reform UK. The real question that I'm thinking right now is, will they even manage to form opposition? With the Liberal Democrats gaining a number of by-elections in recent years along with Labor, and with them picking up vote shares in the opinion polls, I do wonder if the Conservatives might fall below maybe the Scottish National Party, which was formerly led by Nicola Sturgeon, or the Liberal Democrats. It would be very embarrassing if they were to.
Two minor parties that joined forces in a bid to increase chances of an election victory have split no less than 7 days after being registered. Back in August, the Health Australia Party and Informed Medical Options, neither of whom have ever had an elected representative and who both have similar policies, including on issues like vaccination, merged to form the Heart Party. The new name was approved by the AEC on October 3. On October 10, though, 6 News has learned HAP has pulled out of the joint party. Well, HAP's registered party officer Lisa Bentley, she spoke to 6 News about what exactly has happened.
Initially, we saw the, alignment between Heart's policies and HAP's policies, and we had productive interactions with their executive team, and, that went really well. However, after a period of due diligence, it became clear that at this point in time, it would prove unmanageable for us at HAP. As you're aware, Leo, minor parties rely on volunteers who have, many other commitments coming up, and they need their time and resources free. And we took that into consideration as well. Particularly as we've recently received communication from the VC, as you're aware, regarding our membership audit process.
How exactly can you feasibly go forward here? Because as you've said, you've got the membership audit coming up, and you've also got, quite bluntly looking at, and not even registered federally anymore, but the Vic election results, they are still, a fair bit away from where you need to actually get elected.
Yeah, you're right. Look, much of the actual details held in confidence between the two parties. So, we'll respect that. But the overall message was that it's unmanageable for us at this point in time. And we also want to focus on getting through the audit process, and that is our priority. Now, although we haven't had anybody elected just yet, we have strong beliefs that we will get somebody elected at the next Victorian election. And we also have very, very strong beliefs. We got very close to getting elected at other times. And we are a common sense party. So we want to move forward with common sense policies into the next Victorian election.
What gives you that confidence to say that you think you might be close to 2026 elected?
Well, we have a very passionate, strong party here in Victoria. Though we are small, we work hard, and I have no doubt we will get through the audit process. We've had some really positive feedback since we started that process from members and supporters alike, and we're really confident that we will get through that process quite easily. I guess the other question you had is that, HAP has come very close in a couple of elections, and we're really positive. And that's why we're moving forward in getting someone elected in the 2026 election. And, Leo, I've talked to you many times before about the fact that as a volunteer organisation, people get burnt out, and there's only so much they can take on. So we need to manage that responsibility and respectfully, and that informs, many of our decisions. So that's what we're trying to do. And I personally, speaking from my personal perspective of being with HAP in the last few years that I've been with HAP, believe that the people who are involved in HAP are here to stay. Like, they are serious about the roles they play in the committee. They do work hard, and they want to support the supporters and the members moving forward to align with the policy development, and to make sure that our members are heard and that we can represent them fairly with a common sense approach moving forward.
And when contacted by Six News, HAR Party leader Michael O'Neill, formerly of Informed Medical Options, said Health Australia's only given reason of demerging was that some members were upset with the merger. To sport now, and the Stars have been struck in the Women's Big Bash League. The Melbourne Stars all out for just 29 runs against the Adelaide Strikers last night. The Strikers, who'd earlier in the night made a total of 177 and ended up taking home the victory with more than 10 overs to spare. The previous lowest WBBL total was 66 runs set in 2017 twice. The result has drawn comparisons to the Sydney Thunder in the men's BBL last year, where they achieved not just the lowest BBL score in history, but the lowest in international T20, bowled out by the Adelaide Strikers as well for just 15 runs. Right now, here's a look at the top stories in Perth on WAMN News. Here's Ivan and Melly.
Thanks, Puggle. Tonight on WAMN News, the voice can still happen. What's next for First Nations advocacy as legislative move can potentially come soon? An exclusive interview coming up.
Into the second term, Basil Zampolis emerges victorious in the Lord Mayor race, despite state political ambitions dogging his campaign.
A teenager has passed away following last week's juvenile detention centre incident at Unit 18.
WA government to make additional moves on firearm law reforms, and later Dr Andrew Miller's comment. Join us tonight on the WAMN News Facebook page and YouTube channel.
Let's get a recap of the top stories we're following on 6 News this hour. And Israel will increase airstrikes in Gaza ahead of a grand invasion. Palestinian authorities have reported the death toll has again risen, 4,385 killed and many more wounded. And thousands of people have reported tremors after a magnitude 5.0 earthquake on the Great Ocean Road in Victoria. The quake was felt across Melbourne and as far away as Tasmania. That is 6 News for this hour. There is more news 24/7 on our website and on social media. Just search 6NewsAU to find us. News is on the hour every hour here on 6 News. I'm Leonardo Puglisi. Thanks for your company. Good night.